I want to get into one of the more important, I think, concepts in using effects in a DAW, perhaps specifically in Pro Tools, but in most, and in analog mixing, to be honest, and that's the difference between using a directly inserted effect versus what's called an effect that's hosted on an aux input track. And I'm going to demonstrate all this, but I also wanted to show a couple drawings of it. So when you have a track, say it's a guitar, and in Pro Tools, let's look at the mix window. And since this is a guitar, you have your volume fader, and this is an instrument, but there is no effect plugged into it. Okay. Really quickly, in Expand, there are built-in effects, but I've turned them off specifically. So if I wanted to insert an effect, I would simply plug in, say, a delay. Okay, and I get my delay. Let's say I move this one down because I'm also going to want some reverb on it. And I'll choose my deverb effect. I'll lower the decay. All right, so I've taken a very dry, we refer to that kind of, plain version of that instrument, that signal, that sound as dry. And I've definitely wetted it up in the with the reverb, made it sound very far away, and then added some echoes. Now, when you insert, so this is completely dry, when you insert an effect in your track, your channel, what you're doing is you're taking that dry signal and you're putting it through that effect, and then it goes to your headphones or your speaker or whatever. Now, you may have noticed or not that, let's get this, sounds like it's still going. It is. Weird. I don't even know what that is. Anyways, if you go to the reverb, you see a dry and wet percentage ratio or relationship. So that's the effect essentially off. And you can blend that way. And that's fine. With the delay, there's the mix. It's called mix, wet, dry, same concept. Okay, how much of the effect do you want to blend in with the original? Now, that's fine. There is another way of using effects, which is using an aux input track. And it looks more like this. When you use an aux input, you have your guitar going directly to your speakers or your headphones, whatever you're monitoring through, completely dry. But then you're using what's called a bus, and you're sending a duplicate of this signal through the effect, which then you choose how much you're sending and how much to blend between the dry and the wet affected signal. By using an aux, you can send multiple tracks to the same effect, and I'll demonstrate all of that. And there's a reason to do this, and I'll talk about while I'm doing it. So again, your basic dry signal going directly to your monitoring system, your headphones in this case, for most of us, or your speakers. Inserting an effect in that chain. So the guitar goes through an effect, reverb, delay, whatever it is, to the speakers. And you can adjust the wet, dry, or the mix level of the effect and the dry. This one, again, the dry signal's going, and you are sending a duplicate essentially at a variable level through that effect and blending it back with the dry signal. So how does that look in Pro Tools? So I have a few tracks here. Let's see, I'm just going to listen to this in a loop. So I have this guitar, I've got some drums and keys and bass. If I look at the mix window, because it's really important, I believe, to do this in the mix window, and if you have forgotten how to get there, if you go up to window, this is our edit window. It's where we move things around. It's where we cut and edit things. In our mix window, we see all of the volume faders, all of our panning knobs, etc., etc. I'm going to highlight my bass track because what I'm going to do is go up to track and new. I'm going to make this one stereo. And instead of an audio track, and I am in the full version of Pro Tools, but it doesn't really matter except you just won't have as many choices here. I want you to choose an aux input track. So a stereo aux input track that we're going to call reverb and hit create. Okay. So notice there's a different icon on the aux input track as compared to your instrument tracks, as compared to your audio tracks, as compared to your master fader. There's nothing, we just made a track. In that track, we're going to go ahead and insert the multi-channel plugin reverb called Deverb. And again, I have more things available to me than you do. Now, we won't hear this reverb because all we've done so far is essentially created this. We haven't made the connection to it yet. So in order to get our guitar to the reverb, we need to do a couple things. On the reverb track, we've inserted our reverb, so that's one thing you have to do. The second thing you have to do is change the input I/O, okay? So this is the I/O. The top where it says no input is the input, the I of the I/O. And below it is the O of the I/O. And all of us might have different things. It might say main out, it might say output 1 and 2, it might say whatever the sound card you guys are using. We have to click on the input I/O and change it to a bus. And hopefully y'all have the same buses available to you. Whatever the first one is, it could be 19 and 20, I don't really care. Bus 1 and 2. So we've created an aux input track. We've changed the input I/O to bus 1 and 2. We've inserted a reverb. Now, we still need to get the guitar, the drums, whatever we want, to that reverb. What is this drum track, by the way? Oh, that's the actual drum track. We're listening to this. So I'm going to go up on the guitar track to the sends, okay? And notice that you have sends across the board for all your instruments, all your tracks. And I'm going to send my guitar on bus 1 and 2, and you can see that it's yellow, indicating that it's in use, although we aren't actually using it yet. And I select that, and up comes a floating fader. This represents the volume of this bus that is connected to the input I/O of the aux input track. So again, looking at this drawing, we already had this. We already had the guitar go into the speakers. What we have now is the bus connected to our reverb that will then, this is essentially already established, going to the speakers. We have to raise this fader. And what this is ultimately is essentially the wet dry percentage, but it's on a fader individually for our guitar track. So let's listen to that without, and I'll slowly bring up the reverb. Okay, you can hear that. If I stop it, it stops. And you get that reverberation, that echo. Now, what's cool about this is if we want the band to be in the same room together, the same concert hall, We can also send our other instruments at varying levels to the same reverb. So if I go to my snare drum track and I go to bus 1 and 2, this floating fader pops up. It is off essentially. I can select this one and look at it. That one's up. And how much reverb do I want on the snare drum? I'm going to take out the guitar for a second so we can just hear this very clearly. Okay. My hi-hat, I might do the same thing, but maybe slightly different level. My kick, I tend not to put a whole lot of reverb on my kick drum. Snare, depending on the song. Bass, not that much either, especially a synth bass. But now we have reverb. Actually, let's put our keys in and let's send our electric piano to it as well. Okay, so we have kick, snare, hi-hat. I won't put the bass in for the moment. Okay, so why use aux inputs instead of just plugging in reverbs across all of these different tracks? There's a few reasons. One, and this is not as important these days as it was when I started. Reverbs are really processor intensive. They tax the computer. They really challenge the computer's processor. Now, that's not as true these days. So if I put a reverb in all of these, session would probably run fine. However, I would need to go in to every single one and adjust the dry wet as opposed to just raising these faders up. We can argue if that's easier or harder to do. I think it's easier to use an aux input and have one reverb and kind of just bring these up. I want to hear more reverb on the guitar. I raise the fader. To create the sense of the different instruments being in this same hall together or in the same church, whatever the case may be, it's really cool to just use one reverb and send all your, a variety of instruments to it. Sometimes you want a different reverb, but point being. And then it's just another way to use the aux input track because there's other ways to use it. Okay, so when I say that I want you to have an aux input track with a reverb with multiple tracks going to it, it's really, I want most of the tracks going to it at varying levels. This is just another color on your color palette, another thing to play with to give you a different sense of sound. So actually, really quickly, I'm going to make another one because it's not just reverbs that go on aux inputs. This one I'm going to call delay because I'm going to put a delay on it. And I'm going to insert the multi-channel delay. I believe you all have the mod delay 3, which is a stereo delay. I'm going to link these to the left. Let's not. We'll do slightly different. I'll do 1/8 notes on the left, and I'll do 16th notes on the right. Okay, and you can see that those are in milliseconds, but because this is synced to the tempo of the song, I can use the musical notation to give me that sense. So far, all I've done is create the aux input and inserted the delay. I need to choose a bus. Now, 1 and 2 is already used for the reverb, so I can't do that. I'm going to use bus 3 and 4. I'm going to go to my guitar track, and I'm going to, underneath the send to the reverb, I'm going to send it now at a different level. Now, this is the floating fader for the delay. And I'm going to send the guitar to this delay. And let's see what that sounds like. Okay, I'm going to increase the feedback, which is how many of those echoes will we hear. Right now it was at 0, even though we did hear 1 or 2. I want to go like to 30% with both of them. And I like how the different rhythmic, the 8th and the 16th are working like with each other. I don't really like it where the strum. But anyways, now we have a delay at our disposal. I'm going to put some delay on the keys, even though I probably wouldn't stick with that. But I'm going to do it. Let's see what that sounds like with guitar. Okay, a little bit of a left-right bounce there. With the reverb. Okay, now would I put delay on my snare drum? Probably not. Let's see what happens. I kind of like it in a weird way. Now, I'm going to throw another curveball your way. 2 more curveballs, actually. Let's see. How do I do this? So on a Mac, if you hit Control click, no. If you hit Option click, no. Interesting. That shouldn't be happening. Let's see. Interesting. All right, I'm not going to bother with that right now. But if you right click on this, you can name it. So it'll be called reverb instead of, let's see. Why can't I control click? Should be working, and it's not. Okay, so just remember, bus 1 and 2 is your reverb, bus 3 and 4 is the delay. I can go into the mix window, and if I drop down like I showed you the other day, if I drop down the automation lane, slightly different, yours is a triangle, to see velocity, to see volume and panning, I now also see these sends. So this is the send, the level is the volume, that fader, to the reverb, and this one is to the delay. And let's just say I choose level. That means that now this line represents the amount of the snare drum that I'm sending to the delay. And I want to turn that down, okay? Make sure that I have that one selected. No, I had the reverb selected. All right, so that was the reverb. But now this is the level. So if I raise this, you see the line go up. If I bring it down, and what I want to do is on this 4th snare drum, I'm going to bring up the delay. And I'm going to bring it down before the next one, because I just want it to get hit too much, but I'm just playing around for the moment. Let's bring this up again. Maybe to about -4, see what happens. Okay, so now you'll see that this moves up only at this time. Okay, so that's not ready for prime time, but you get the idea. I would want to tweak that delay, maybe make it a little longer, a little quieter. But anyways, aux input tracks allow you to send a sound through that aux and blend the amount of the effect that you want to hear with your dry signal.